You found the one. The layout is perfect. The neighborhood is exactly where you want to be. The seller accepted your offer. Escrow is open, and you are already mentally arranging furniture in rooms you do not yet own. But 30 days after closing, your city building department shows up at your door because someone pulled the permit history on your new home. And what they found, or more precisely, what they did not find, is about to turn your dream purchase into the most expensive mistake of your financial life. That finished basement? Unpermitted. The bedroom addition over the garage? Unpermitted. The electrical panel upgrade the seller disclosed as a recent improvement? Unpermitted. And here is the legal reality that most buyers never learn until it is too late. When you purchased that home, you did not just buy the improvements, you bought the liability. Every unpermitted structure, every code violation, every failed inspection that never happened, you are now legally responsible for all of it. The previous owner's shortcuts became your financial obligation the moment you signed that closing document. I am Engineer Vance, licensed forensic structural engineer. I have been called in to evaluate unpermitted construction in hundreds of residential properties across the United States, and I'm here to tell you that the unpermitted construction trap is one of the most financially devastating and most completely avoidable disasters in American real estate. Today I am going to show you exactly how to identify it before you buy, what it costs when you miss it, and what your legal options are if you are already living inside it. Let me establish the scale of this problem before we go any deeper, because most buyers dramatically underestimate how common unpermitted construction is in the American residential housing stock. Industry estimates based on permit records cross-referenced against property improvement data suggest that approximately 1 in 4 American homes contains at least one unpermitted improvement of meaningful scope. In older housing markets, cities like Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago, and Philadelphia, where housing stock frequently dates to the 1940s through 1970s and has changed hands multiple times, that ratio is significantly higher. The most commonly unpermitted improvements, in order of frequency, are finished basements, garage conversions to living space, bedroom and bathroom additions, deck and patio enclosures converted to conditioned living space, electrical panel upgrades and circuit additions, plumbing modifications including bathroom additions and kitchen relocations, HVAC system replacements and duct modifications, and structural modifications including wall removals and beam installations. Notice what every single item on that list has in common. They are all improvements that add apparent value to a home, improvements that a seller can use to justify a higher asking price, and they are all improvements that require permits, inspections, and code compliance that, without a permit record, you have absolutely no way to verify actually occurred. This is the fundamental economic incentive driving unpermitted construction. A homeowner who converts a garage to living space without permits saves the permit fee, avoids the inspection process, and does not have to bring the work up to code. They then sell the home with the converted garage counted as additional square footage, commanding a higher price per the larger footprint, while passing the liability for every code violation in that conversion to the buyer, who had no way of knowing the work was never inspected. That is not an accident. That is a deliberate transfer of financial risk from a seller who knows exactly what they did to a buyer who has no idea what they are inheriting. Now here's where I need you to understand the engineering reality behind the permit and inspection process, because most buyers think of permits as a bureaucratic formality, a piece of paper that a contractor pulls to satisfy the city. That is not what a permit is. A building permit is the mechanism by which a licensed government inspector verifies that work meets minimum safety standards at critical stages of construction, stages that are only accessible before the work is concealed behind drywall, tile, and finish materials. The International Building Code and the International Residential Code establish inspection hold points for a reason. A framing inspection verifies that structural members are the correct size, species, and grade for the loads they are carrying, that connections are made with the correct fasteners at the correct spacing per IRC Table R6 02.3, and that load paths are continuous from the roof structure down through the wall framing, the floor system, and into the foundation. Once drywall is installed over that framing, a home inspector, a buyer, or even a forensic engineer cannot visually verify any of those conditions without destructive investigation. The framing is permanently concealed. Its adequacy or inadequacy is invisible from that point forward. And that invisibility is exactly what unpermitted construction exploits. I have opened walls in unpermitted additions and found 2x4 headers spanning openings that required LVL beams. I have found electrical wiring stapled over structural members with no junction boxes, no circuit breakers, and no ground fault protection. I have found drain lines installed without proper slope, creating chronic sewer gas backup conditions inside finished walls. I have found post-tension cables in slabs that were core drilled through without scanning, by contractors adding plumbing for an unpermitted bathroom. None of these conditions were visible from the surface. All of them were dangerous, and in every single case, the buyer had purchased the home believing the improvements were legitimate because nobody told them to check the permit record before closing. IRC, Section R6, 02.7 governs header requirements over structural openings, and undersized headers create concentrated loads on the king studs and trimmer studs below that those members were never designed to carry, leading to progressive settlement and door frame racking over time. NEC, Article 210 governs circuit protection requirements and unpermitted electrical work without AFC. Eye protection is a fire risk that insurance companies specifically exclude from coverage when the violation is documented. IRC Section P3005 governs sanitary drainage slope requirements, and improperly sloped drain lines create chronic backup conditions and sewer gas migration into living spaces. These are not bureaucratic violations. They are engineering failures with direct consequences for structural integrity, fire safety, and the health of every person living inside that structure. Let me walk you through a forensic investigation I conducted in the Silver Lake neighborhood of Los Angeles in 2022, a case that encapsulates the complete financial and structural consequence of the unpermitted construction trap with a precision that every buyer in America needs to hear before they make an offer on any property. The buyers were a couple in their mid-30s who had purchased a 1948 construction bungalow with what the listing described as a newly renovated lower level with bonus room, full bath, and kitchenette. The listing showed approximately 1,700 square feet of living space, and the purchase price reflected that square footage at a market rate consistent with the Silver Lake area. The home inspection, performed by a licensed home inspector, noted that the lower-level renovation appeared professional and identified no major deficiencies. Escrow closed in March 2022. Total purchase price, $1,140,000. In May 2022, the buyers applied for a permit to install a mini-split HVAC system in the lower level. The permit application triggered a routine review of the property's permit history by the Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety. That review revealed that the lower-level renovation, the bonus room, the full bath, the kitchenette, and an electrical panel upgrade that had been disclosed as a recent improvement had been completed entirely without permits. No permit had been pulled. No inspection had been performed. No certificate of occupancy had been issued for any of the work. The LADBS issued a notice of violation requiring the buyers to either obtain retroactive permits for all unpermitted work or demolish the unpermitted improvements and restore the structure to its last permitted condition. I was retained to perform a forensic structural assessment of the lower level to evaluate what retroactive permitting would actually require, and what I found inside those walls validated every concern I have described today. The lower level had been created by excavating beneath the original home's slab-on-grade foundation to create a daylight basement, an extremely complex and potentially dangerous structural modification that requires engineered underpinning of the existing foundation during excavation. The underpinning, if performed at all, had been done without engineering design or inspection. The existing foundation showed evidence of differential settlement at two corners of the excavated area, with crack patterns consistent with inadequate underpinning during the excavation process. The electrical panel upgrade had increased service from 100 amps to 200 amps without a permit, and the work included aluminum branch circuit wiring connected to devices rated for copper wire only, a documented fire hazard that NEC Article 310 specifically addresses with compatibility requirements. The panel installation also lacked the required arc fault circuit interrupter protection on circuits serving the bedroom areas, in direct violation of NEC 2017 Article 210.12. And the kitchenette drain line had been installed at a slope of 1/16 inch per foot, 1/4 of the minimum slope required by IRC, Section P3005.3.1, which mandates 1/4 inch per foot for drain lines 2 inches and smaller. That undersized slope had created a chronic partial blockage condition that had been accumulating organic buildup for years. The retroactive, permitting, and code compliance scope included structural engineering design for the foundation, underpinning at $18,000, foundation remediation at the 2 settlement locations at $22,000, complete electrical system replacement in the lower level, including panel work, AFCI protection, and aluminum to copper wire remediation at $14,000, plumbing drain line correction requiring partial concrete cutting at $8,500, and fire-rated assembly installation at the lower level ceiling per LA building code requirements at $6,300. Total forensic remediation cost, $68,500. On a property purchased for over $1 million, with a lower level renovation that had been explicitly represented in the listing as a feature justifying the price. That is not a renovation. That is a financial ambush that closed escrow with a smile and a staging company. So, here is the pre-purchase protocol that Engineer Vance requires every buyer to execute before releasing any inspection contingency on any residential property. The first step is to pull the permit history for the property from your local building department before your contingency expires. In most jurisdictions, permit records are searchable online by address at no cost. What you are looking for is a permit record for every significant improvement visible in the home. If the listing shows a finished basement, there should be a permit for that work. If there is a deck addition, there should be a deck permit with a final inspection sign-off. Any visible improvement without a corresponding permit record is an immediate red flag requiring investigation before you release your contingency, not after. The second step is to cross-reference the county assessor's recorded square footage against the square footage being represented in the listing. If the assessor shows 1,400 square feet and the listing claims 1,800 square feet, 400 square feet of living area exists somewhere in that property that has never been assessed, which in most cases means it was never permitted. That discrepancy is not a paperwork error. It is documentary evidence of unpermitted living space hiding in plain sight in the public record. The third step is to hire a structural engineer, not just a home inspector, for any property that shows evidence of structural modifications, additions, conversions, or wall removals. A home inspector is trained to identify visible deficiencies. A structural engineer is trained to evaluate whether structural modifications are adequate for their intended loads, whether headers are properly sized, whether beams have adequate bearing, and whether the load path from roof to foundation is continuous and code compliant. For a property with visible additions or conversions, the cost of a structural engineering assessment, between $500 and $1,500, is the most financially protective investment available to any buyer in the American real estate market. The fourth step is to ask the seller directly, in writing through your agent, to disclose all unpermitted improvements and to provide permit documentation for all disclosed improvements. In most states, sellers have a legal obligation to disclose known unpermitted work. A written disclosure request creates a documented record. If the seller conceals known unpermitted work and you discover it after closing, that concealment is the foundation of a real estate fraud claim with documented damages. If you are already the owner of a property with unpermitted improvements, your first option is retroactive permitting, the path most jurisdictions prefer and most building departments will actively assist with. Retroactive permitting involves applying for an after-the-fact permit, submitting engineering drawings documenting the as-built conditions, and undergoing inspections that may require selective demolition of finished materials to expose structural, electrical, and plumbing systems for review. Successful retroactive permitting restores your property's full market value and your ability to finance, insure, and sell without mandatory disclosure of unresolved violations. Your second option is demolition of the unpermitted improvement and restoration to the last permitted condition. For additions and conversions that would be prohibitively expensive to bring to code, demolition may be the more cost-effective path. And your third option, when the unpermitted work was deliberately concealed by the seller, is legal action. Real estate fraud claims based on concealed unpermitted work have resulted in significant judgments and settlements across the country. If you can document that the seller knew about the unpermitted work and failed to disclose it, and if you can document the cost of remediation, you have a cognizable damages claim. Engage a real estate litigation attorney before the statute of limitations on your claim expires, because that clock started running the day you closed escrow. The unpermitted construction trap is not a sophisticated scam. It is a completely foreseeable, completely documented, and completely avoidable financial disaster that claims thousands of American buyers every year. Buyers who were never told to pull a permit record, never told to hire a structural engineer, and never told that the beautiful finished basement they fell in love with might come with $68,000 of mandatory remediation attached to it. Pull the permit record before you release your inspection contingency. Cross-reference the assessor's square footage. Hire a structural engineer on any property showing evidence of modification. Demand written disclosure from every seller. Those 4 actions, taken before closing, are the difference between a dream home and a forensic file. I am Engineer Vance. Protect your structure. Protect your investment.